Hey, how's it going? I am Merkaba18. Today, I'm going to be bringing you a video that I've been dying to get to for a little while here. This is a Rainbow Six Extraction tier guide. This is just my opinion. You're not going to agree with everything I say here, but I do want to know in the comments below what you think. Who do you think I got wrong? Who do you think I got right? Tell me where I should have done something differently. Please remember to smash that subscribe button. Remember to like the videos, and please make sure to check out my live Twitch channel over at Capitao18. There's a link to that in the description below. And I'm doing all of my operator guides. We've gotten all of them but one finished here, and those will be going up in the next couple of weeks. Then we got some map guides, some incursion guides, all kinds of stuff coming on the channel here. So thank you for your support and thank you for watching. So I wanted to take some time and learn more of the operators and get a better understanding of each of these operators before I dove into a tier list. And I wanted to make sure I was giving it its due. So here we have a tier list set up here. As you can see, there's only 4 tiers, and that is for one specific reason. Even the worst operators in this game are going to fit a very specific niche, even if they don't do it as well as some of the other operators. They're not terrible, and they're not unplayable or unfun to play. And so most of the operators are going to be towards the middle here, and then some of them will be in B and some will be in S. So the difference between A and S tier is going to be simple. It's going to be that the S tier is reserved for the best of the best. Nobody else in the game does what those operators do as well as they do it, in my opinion. And then everything else is just sort of down a little notch from there. So let's go ahead and get right into it. First up here, we have what looks like a lion. Lion's an interesting one. I kind of went back and forth. He is probably one of the better intelligence gatherers in the game. His gun kit is unbelievable. It's a rechargeable ability. But I can't quite put him at S tier simply because intelligence gathering is important. But you can, as you get better at the game, as you play a Maelstrom over and over again and learn it better, Lion is going to fill a role that is less important, in my opinion, as you get better at the game. And so I have to put him at A tier, but he's close to S tier. Very, very close. In my opinion, his ability is not quite strong enough, and his ability, as easy as it is to master in the deeper parts of the end game, and as you get better at the game, it's just going to be harder for you to justify bringing Lion over a damage dealer or a defender or somebody else like a res class. But he's close. He's really, really good. And I know some people are going to disagree with me right away here, but A is where Lion goes. All right, next up we have Pulse. Pulse is also an intelligence gatherer. In my opinion, he doesn't do it quite as well as Lion does, and his information that he gives you is also going to be even less valuable as you get better at the game. It's a rechargeable ability. He can't use his gun while he's doing it, though, so that makes it kind of niche. So he's not quite the worst intelligence gatherer, but he's also just not one that I personally think in most cases is going to be valuable. So he's going to go out in the B tier here, which is, reserved for good operators that don't do things quite as well. Tashanka is an interesting one. He is a good defender, and he can really, really do lockdown on certain areas and defend specific objectives. And if you master him well enough, he can be an interesting one. I just don't think his ability is quite strong enough to go into the A tier. And I tend to prefer some of the other defenders over him. So we're going to go with B tier here with Tashanka as well. Siege reworked Tashanka's ability recently or within the last several years. And I think I'd like to see him have the ability he has in Siege better than the one that he has here. But that's just a personal opinion. All right, next up we got Alibi. Alibi is an interesting one. I went kind of back and forth with her because her ability is one of the most unique in the game. And I think I have to put her in S tier. A lot of people think she's a little bit more A tier or meh. I think she's great. Her gun kit is really good. Her ability is going to gather you some basic information. So because, Lion's going to gather you information, but Alibi can also save your team's life by essentially throwing Alibi recharges all over the map. And because she recharges, and one of the things you're going to notice in this tier list is that anyone with an ability that recharges is probably going to be more S tier than A tier. And they're going to get preferential treatment, and they're going to get selected by me more often. Alibi is incredible. Her ability to, regardless of the objective, to control specific parts of the map, to distract Archeans and make things hard for Archeans is just unmatched, and her ability is one of the more unique ones in the entire game. So she's an S tier operator, the first of many for me. Hibana is next, and Hibana's an interesting one. I went back and forth between her and a couple of other operators that fill her role. She's got one of the strongest, if not one of the better offensive ultimates in the game. But to me, because of her gun kit and because of a little bit more fragility and such, I just can't quite put her at S tier. At some point, if they buff her guns or nerf her, or like nerf her ability and make it a little bit more level, because her ability is like top notch, one of the best in the game. Her guns are probably the worst in the game or among the worst in the game. And so I can't put somebody with that differentiation, even though her ability recharges, even though you can control where you throw it or use it. I just can't quite put her at S tier because of her guns. So she's going to go in A tier. She's amazing. I don't like her guns very much. So next up we have Nomad, and Nomad's an interesting one. I went back and forth with her as well. I think she is simply A tier, but close to S tier only because her ability doesn't recharge. And there's some other operators that we'll see here in just a minute that do what she does a little bit better, and they recharge their abilities. Her guns are kind of mid to top tier. And she's overall like sturdy and fast, but she's just, because her ability doesn't recharge on its own, she can't quite be an S tier operator in my opinion. So you'll have to pardon me. I'm a little bit sick at the timing of this video, so I'm trying to drink some water throughout just to make sure my voice preserves here. So you'll have to bear with me. Thank you. All right, next up we got Rook. And Rook is a really, really good operator. There are three like operators that are sort of in the same cluster of ability: Rook, Finca, and Doc. And I went back and forth with all three of them. Which one was S tier? Which one was A tier? S tier, as I said, is the best of the best and no one else. Rook is really close, and I can hear an argument for S tier on him, but I got to put him at A tier. His damage reduction, his gun kit, his utility for his team is unparalleled in a lot of ways. But there's one operator that we'll get to here in just a minute that I think is just a little bit better. But he you know, he's not a bad pick no matter what you look at and how you frame it. He's top notch. He just doesn't do it quite as well as S tier. All right, next up we have, who is this one? This one is Smoke. Okay, I was trying to look at the icon is sometimes hard to see. So we got Smoke here. Smoke is an interesting one. I can't quite put him at S tier, even though you can make an argument for it. Probably some people will. His guns are pretty decent. Not some of the best in the game, not some of the worst in the game. And his ability overlaps pretty directly with with another operator we'll get to in a minute. But he's just not quite as S tier as one of the other operators we'll talk about here in just a second as well. His gas grenades are fun. I love playing him. He feels like an interesting, and as you progress with him, you feel like you're getting more powerful. It's just fun, and I love using his ability. I just can't quite put him at S tier. So he's going to go in A tier for me. Next up we have, is this Lion? Looks like. No, this is Vigil. Okay, so we got Vigil next. Vigil was one that I was pretty much set from the beginning. He's really, really easy to understand in terms of like what he brings to the table. He's incredibly difficult to master. So it was pretty much S tier from the start for me with Vigil. His abilities unlike anything in the game, and probably will be for the longest time until they bring in some other operators that do some of the stuff that he does. He's just unparalleled. He is rather fragile, and his guns are really, really good. The only thing that's bad about him is that he's rather fragile. And so as you're learning him, you're going to struggle, and you're going to take a little bit more damage than you want to. And it's going to be tough to master him. But once you do, his utility and what he brings to the table is just unmatched in the game, in my opinion. So he goes in the S tier for me. Next up, we got Yeager. Yeager's a fun one. I went back and forth with him as well. But he's just not quite S tier for me. He's close. And this is one that people are going to disagree with. There's going to be some back and forth, I'm sure. But I think, you know, Yeager for me is a very A tier, almost S tier operator. His guns aren't quite as good as the S tier operator that we're going to put up here in just a minute. But his utility is unparalleled. It's a really good objective defender. You can't quite use it as quickly and as in a pinch. And there's some other drawbacks to it that you'll see in some of my in-depth video guides, but he's really close to an S tier operator. He's just not quite there for me. So he goes in A tier as well. Next up, we have my least favorite operator in the entire game, and it's not going to shock you if you've watched my Twitch channel. I don't particularly care for IQ. I think she is inexplicably fragile. She moves really quick, but she just takes so much damage. And I can understand Vigil taking a lot of damage because of the utility that he brings. But IQ takes as much damage, and given that she's an intel gatherer, you have to play her a very, very carefully and very niche way. And I just don't think her ability is all that great personally. And I don't think, especially if you have like Lion or Pulse as an option, I would much rather bring them, and to a lesser degree for intelligence with Alibi. She's a C tier operator for me. She's the only C tier operator in the game at the moment. I think in addition to that, her perks are terrible. The only redeeming quality really with IQ is that she can use her gun, and that she has great guns that come with her. But she's probably the only one in the game where I can say, you probably ought to rework her ability just so that it's a little bit more fun or interesting to play. I just don't like her. So next up, we have Ella. Ella is one of my favorites, just a stark contrast from IQ. Ella is an S tier operator, no questions asked in my opinion. Her ability to recharge and stun anything in the game essentially for a long period of time. She's basically a walking walking stun and paralysis grenade. And her guns are amazing. She's tough, she's fast. She's just great. And anytime you have the option to bring Ella, you're not going to go wrong. So, and because her ability recharges, she's a little bit better than Nomad, even though they do something slightly different. So next up, we have Capitao. Now, if you had asked me about Capitao at the beginning of this, my adventures in Rainbow Six Extraction, I would have probably put Capitao at a C tier, just because I didn't really like his ability. It's weird, and it's sort of inexplicable to me, but his ability just doesn't feel much more powerful at max level than it does at low level. And I kind of wish that they would rework it a little bit. His perks are a little bit less good, and his guns are a little worse than, say, Smoke, for example. I just don't think he does what he does quite as well as Smoke, even though some people might disagree with that. I think Capitao is a pretty B-tier operator, maybe even close to C. I think he's also kind of due for a rework in a way, especially considering what we're about to talk about here with Zofia. But that's where I put him. Sledge is going to be probably the most controversial option here for me. There's going to be some specific people I can think of in my community who are not going to like what I'm about to say. But Sledge is a pretty close to S tier operator in my opinion, but I got to put him at A. S tier is reserved for the best of the best, and I think Ella does what she does slightly better than Sledge. I think her guns are a little bit better. I think the fact that you can throw them anywhere on the map, like away from you, and not have to go up and do things in melee range means that she's a little bit easier to utilize, and her skill ceiling is a little bit lower. So Sledge has probably one of the hardest abilities and kits to master in the entire game. And because you have to be in melee range, if you're not really great at that, and my personal preference is not to get close to Archeans so that I don't have to deal with like the potential of taking damage. And I understand that's a skill level on my part. I get that. But because it has to be in melee range in order to utilize his stun and his damage, from the ult at least, I have to put him at A tier. He's really close to S tier, and maybe in a month you'll see me put him at S tier. I just can't quite put him there because Ella, I think, is just a little bit better at that. All right, next up is probably my favorite operator in the entire game. We got Finka here. So she's an unquestionable S tier in my opinion. The only reason I probably can't put Doc and Rook at S tier here is because I think Finka is the best heal/res class in the game. Rechargeable heal, it's temporary, granted. Damage mitigation, an incredible gun kit, tons of utility, range res from anywhere on the map. You don't even have to be able to see the operator across the map to res them, which separates her from Doc, obviously. She takes a ton of damage. She is a little bit slower, but she's sturdy. She's fast. I almost said fat. I apologize. She's fast. She's not fat. She's fast. My apologies there. Her kit is just sort of unmatched in my opinion, and with the most recent buff that she got, because of the nature of preventing your teammates from going down, She's just a little bit better than Rook, I think. She can prevent teammates from going down in a very sophisticated way, and her skill ceiling is really high. She's fun to learn. Just everything about her is great. She's an S-tier operator, period. All right, next up we have another S-tier operator, Zofia, who is probably the strongest operator in the entire game. I don't think there's any other class in the game that can res themselves, do stuns and damage with her ult, and they recharge. You can aim them anywhere in the game. Her perks are uncontrollable. Her gun kit is off the charts. Everything about her is just really, really broken at the moment. And I think she's one of the only operators in the entire game who is due or will probably receive a nerf at some point. We haven't seen her in the Maelstrom yet, probably because she's so good. She's hard to balance, I think. But you're probably, within the next couple of months of the timing of this video, you're going to end up seeing her nerfed a little bit. But as it stands right now, she's probably the strongest single operator in the entire game. She's a walking, she can solo critical almost anything in the game. Just unmatched. She does everything. So she's an S-tier operator. We have one more S-tier operator as well. We're going to bring Gridlock up here. Gridlock is the best defender in the game, in my opinion, hands down. She can lock down an entire room. She can defend an entire objective by herself while your friends run off and do their thing. Area control. And as you master her, you'll find ways to use her offensively to create problems for our key-ins. Her gun kit she has one of the best guns in the game, in my opinion, in the Saw. Her utility, her perks, her kit, everything about her is great. The only drawback to Gridlock is that her ability doesn't recharge itself. Don't ask me why. Considering some of the other rechargeable abilities in the game, I don't know why that is. We have a video, by the way, coming for some improvements that I think will make extraction better, and I think that's one of them. I think everybody in the game should just have a rechargeable ability, or no one should. It makes no sense to me that Fuse has a rechargeable ability, but Nomad doesn't. Ella does. But Gridlock doesn't. It's weird. It's all over the map, and I think they're going to have to either go with one or the other. Either they all recharge or none of them do, but that's just my personal opinion, and that's another video for another day. All right, so next up we have two more operators, the final two here. I am kind of back and forth on this one. I want to put him at S tier, but because of the niche and because of some of the, like Gridlock, or for example, like Ella, or even to a lesser extent Alibi, I have to put Fuse in an A tier, but he's close to S tier. The only thing that makes him less than an S tier operator, in my opinion, is that you have to deploy his ability on a wall, or soft wall specifically, and so you can only utilize it in specific areas, which makes him a little bit worse in terms of his ult than Ella is, or Hibana is. But also, his gun kit is way better than Hibana's, so in terms of like his ability, it's a little bit worse. In terms of his guns, it's a little bit better, or way better. But he's just not quite an S tier operator. He's very close. He's just such a niche operator. He does that niche very well. He can control entire areas if you have soft walls to deploy on and stuff, but just can't quite put him at S tier. He's an A tier operator for me. And then the final one is one that I went back and forth with in terms of Finca. The only reason I can't put Doc at an S tier here is because Finca does it a little bit better, I think. The ranged revive is great if you're precise with Doc, but the ranged revive with Finca is just a little bit better because, well, actually technically a lot better, because you can do it from anywhere and instantly. You don't have to aim to hit the person with the stim shot. She can prevent people from going down before they ever do. Her ability is temporary, but it recharges itself. Doc's does not. So Doc is great. I had put him right up there with Rook, and just a half a step below Finca, in my opinion. But he's up there, and I think some people are going to disagree with this. I just don't think he's quite as good as Finca for a number of reasons. His gun kit is pretty great. I would even suggest that it's probably a little bit better than Finca, just depending on how you like to play. But his ability is just a little bit worse than Finca's, and I just can't put him up there in S tier. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please let me know what you think, and where did I go wrong? What did I do wrong here? Where would you change? What would you change? Let me know in the comments below. Please remember to subscribe to the YouTube channel here, like this video, and I will see you live over at Twitch, Merkaba18, sometime in the near future. Thank you so much for watching. See you again next time.